Hey everyone, welcome back to the Book Cave with me, Jenny. So today I'm doing a readathon of the Time Warp Trio series, which is 16 books about 3 boys who travel through time to different places as well as different eras and have all sorts of adventures throughout it. I really liked this when I was younger. I want to say probably like 4th, 5th grade, so probably about 10 or 11. And I feel like that's about the age this is meant for. So it'll be interesting to see what I think of it now as an adult. So book 1 in the Time Warp Trio is Knights of the Kitchen Table. And obviously from the title, it's a spoof on Knights of the Round Table. This takes us back to Arthurian times. And of course this introduces us to our 3 main characters, which are Joe, Fred, and Sam. Joe is the narrator, and this also explains to us how exactly everything happened. So Joe's uncle sends him a magic book for his birthday. And it literally is a magic book. And again, this is a really short book. It is 50 pages, and it does have illustrations. And I want to say that's on just about, every page. Some of them are just little like this. But then you do have some like full-sized illustrations, such as like this. And I just really love the style of the illustrations. I feel like it works really well with the kind of, silliness that's inherent in this series. And yeah, I definitely did enjoy it. I could definitely recommend it for, I would say, probably elementary kids, possibly even younger elementary kids, because like I said, it is actually 55 pages, and it, like I said, does read obviously very quickly. I do feel like there is quite a bit of plot convenience at times, but I do feel like what bit of plot convenience there is stuff that's easy to overlook, for the audience this is meant for. And yeah, so I will definitely be reading more of the series. I believe there's 16 in total. I was able to find 14 from the library. So I'm going to see if I can find the final 2 that I would need to read the whole series. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to diving into the rest of this fun series. Now, I forgot to say, in this book, something I really like and found funny is that I found 2 references to Lord of the Rings. We have the Black Knight says, "No, none shall pass," and Fred, I believe it is, says, "I swear I've heard that before." And then the dragon is named Smog. And of course, I had to look that one up because I'm like, okay, was Smog the name of a dragon anywhere else? And as far as I could find, it wasn't. So that was also very fun that that little tidbit was in here to kind of encourage the readers of this book to sort out where did that come from and maybe go ahead and read, the epic Lord of the Rings fantasy. So yeah, I just absolutely had to add that little tidbit in. I finished the Not So Jolly Roger, and this goes back in time to pirate times, and the boys get to meet Blackbeard. I do feel like this is kind of a borderline book in the series, in that it is definitely more violent in the fact that there are some deaths that are quite obvious, that they were death, but it's not super graphic. just he heard a gunshot and then bodies fall. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious, but it's not super graphic, but I could still understand why that might be something that not everybody is comfortable with, especially given the age range that this series is for. There are also some light cuss words, hellfire and damnation, which again, especially given the age range, I do feel like that can be a little questionable. One thing I did like is that we get a historical afterword that kind of shows what happens, because the boys do wind up breaking one of Joe's lamps, and so obviously they get in trouble, and it kind of shows the consequences of what happens, and the consequences make, a lot of sense given everything. So yeah, like I said, this is a semi-questionable installment in the series, still enjoyable enough. I do wish that we got some more characterization with the three main characters, and I do wish that they didn't argue quite as much, but this is still early books yet, so hopefully that will get better later on. But yeah, I'm definitely going to continue, and we'll report back with more. The Good, the Bad, and the Goofy is about the Wild West, and this one, I do like the fact that we don't start out in the middle of the adventure. We start out with the setup and then actually get into the adventure. I also like the fact that there are some inconsistencies in the Western movie that the boys are watching, and Sam does point at least some of them out, but then there are some that he doesn't. But I do like the fact as well that once they go back and they meet the cowboys, they learn that, wow, actually most cowboys weren't white. There's actually a good bit of Mexican and black cowboys in the group that they find. And then they do wind up with the Native Americans. And I've seen a little bit of controversy on that when I was reading reviews, just because some of the Native Americans did want to scalp the boys, but then others didn't, and I feel like, again, this kind of shows that, not everybody is the same just because they are a certain race or, anything like that. There is nuance to everybody. And yes, again, this was one that did have, again, a lot of adventure. I feel like they all have. And I did also like the fact that now as we're getting further in, we're also seeing consistency in the fact that every time the boys go back in time, they have to find the book. And the book is always kind of difficult to find. It's actually always with another person. And so I am enjoying kind of seeing them having to find the book. Although I will say they don't really do a whole lot in any of the books to actually try and find it yet. They just kind of bumble around. And yeah, and again, this has lots of illustrations. I do feel like there's a few less illustrations in this book, so I feel like it's kind of building up people, a child's reading abilities, reading endurance, because now there's obviously going to be some more words in the book since there's less pictures. And they're definitely an interesting style of illustrations. I'll have to show some from some more of the books that I'm going to have physically from the library, but they're all pretty simple, relatively shape-based, and this is actually pretty consistent for Lane Smith's illustrations. Lane Smith has illustrated a lot of John Shushka books. And yeah, I do think they make a good team when it comes to that. So yeah, I will be moving on to more of the series. So in this installment of the Time Warp Trio, the trio goes back to 40,000 BC, and although the title is Your Mother Was a Neanderthal, they're talking more about Cro-Magnons and saying that this would be the time Cro-Magnons would have been around. And I honestly don't remember if that's true or not. But yeah, so I felt like the title was a little misleading. But one thing I did really like is that they're now actually doing some problem solving and trying to plan ahead. Now that they know, okay, well, we have to find the book. Maybe if we hold on to it, it'll be there in our hands. And once we get there, we can come back whenever we want. Don't have to worry about trying to find it. Anything like that. Unfortunately, this backfires. And this was another pretty, fun, short little adventure. And I feel like this one you get more of an organic adventure. And it doesn't feel so much forced as some of the others do. And we also get the whole man versus nature instead of man versus man. Pardon me, like the last couple have been. So yeah, this was definitely one of the better ones, in my opinion. And I was actually able to find the 2 books my library didn't have through interlibrary loan. So they will be here, I'm hoping, pretty soon so that I can actually continue to read these in their publication order. So yeah, I will be back with the next book. So this is the 5th book in the series, and the only one that actually deals with the future. And this one was alright. I do like that we get to see family again. Or I should say, distant family. Just like in the last book. We also get to meet Uncle Joe again. And we do get some more time travel rules. So all in all, this is a pretty fun installment. And it does develop the world a little bit better. I do feel like the boys could still be better fleshed out. They're still not all that much of characters. They just have a few personality traits and that's it. You don't see a whole lot more of them. But again, fun enough. And I will definitely be continuing with the series. Tut Tut is book 6 in the Time Warp Trio. And this one was pretty interesting. I do like ancient Egypt, so I thought that aspect of it was cool. I also like that we get a lesser known female pharaoh introduced here, and while as with all the other ones, it's definitely not historically accurate, I feel like it's enough to get you interested in the time period, and especially for, younger readers, reluctant readers. I like that, in all honesty, this whole series is varied in the time periods they go to. And although it may all be pretty much action and problem solving, there's still enough differences that I feel like one of these books should hit for just about anybody. And yeah, so this has been still a fun little project. And I was able to actually get the 2 that my library didn't have from another county. So I will actually be able to read the whole series. And I will report back when I get to the next one. Summer reading is killing me, is a fun entry in the series. This one, instead of going to a different time, the boys get to go, well, not really into books, but bring the book characters out of their books. And this was, again, an interesting one, and I enjoyed getting to see all these characters, most of which I knew, some of which are new. And then there's actually a reading list at the back of the book of, I guess it's supposed to be the reading list that their school gave them. And that's kind of cool that it has all of those. And it definitely does have some 90s references, like with the American Girl. And I just found that pretty funny because that was a series I was really into at that age. And I do feel like it was an interesting way to address the fact that there aren't very many girls in this series the way they had the girl. So I did enjoy that, and this was definitely one of the better ones in the series, and I am interested to see, as we get further on in time, because this one was published in 1998, and I believe book number 16 was published around about 2010 or so. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how they change in that time. And I'm definitely looking forward to more. So book 8 is It's All Greek to Me. And in this one, the boys go back to a form of Greek history. And I find it interesting that the same as in the last book, in this one we have something that's a little different in that they don't open the book and wish to go there. It's something to where perhaps the paper was put into the book or, something like that. And I do also like that it was based on their school play about the Greek myths, and it wasn't actually the Greek myths, so you still get that little bit of playfulness. And I also found it funny that the play they put on is actually a play that John Sheska wrote for his daughter's 4th grade class, and there's actually a link and that you can download it if you want to have your child's class perform it, or whatever, if your child reads the book and wants to suggest it, that they can do that. So I thought that was fun as well. And this one, though, I did feel like it was kind of weak in that there really wasn't a whole lot about the Greek myths, about Greek history or anything. It was just the names and what they are. Although, of course, a lot of the myths are pretty dark, so, But yeah, this was definitely one of the weaker ones in the series. See You Later, Gladiator is book 10, and obviously from the title, this takes place in ancient Roman times. I do like the fact that they try to make this different than the one that takes place, pardon me, in ancient Greece. And obviously this one focuses on the gladiator fights, whereas the It's All Greek to Me focused on the Greek mythology, the Greek gods. Another thing I liked is that in this one, we learn that they cannot read the different languages that they would encounter. There are signs that are in Roman and they cannot, or Latin, I'm sorry, and they cannot read them. And this is questioned, which I like the fact that it was questioned, but it wasn't answered. I wish it would have been answered. Of course, I'm sure the answer would have just been, oh, magic, or oh, you don't need to read the signs because you can ask somebody what it says, or something like that. So overall, This was, again, one of the more violent ones, obviously. Although I will say it was not as violent as the second book, The Not So Jolly Roger, because this one did not have any actual, on-screen deaths. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to be interested, as I've said with all of these, to see how exactly the next one is going to be tackled and the whole rest of this series. So this one takes place in ancient Japan, and one thing I did like is that the teacher's name was Basho, and that's kind of a little Easter egg, and it is explained in there that there's a haiku poet by that name. And I did also like that there was a brief history of the haiku and how it actually started out as a game. And yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And then it did get a little meta in that Joe kind of breaks the fourth wall, talking about, how I get bored writing these books, so I'm just going to kind of skim over this. And yeah, I do feel like they're getting a little better, but I don't feel like there's a whole lot of character development. Another thing I did like is that we got to see the great-granddaughters again, and we also learn a little bit more, like the whole thing that was brought up in the last book. How come we can understand people but not read? And then in this time, the understanding goes on the fritz, and the great-granddaughters give us a name for what the spell is, auto-translate spell. And we also learn some more things about the time travel, that, they say the boys must be on just full auto time travel. So we know that there is a way to hold on to the book, and that there's supposed to be a guide. And yeah, so it's kind of adding a little bit to the lore of the series. And I do like that, because a lot of series aimed at middle grade, they tend to kind of be a jump in wherever each is more or less self-contained. You may want to read the first one first. Like in this one, you get introduced to the characters, learn how they got the book. But other than that, you could read most of them in pretty much any order. And, well, I think even this one, with having the great-granddaughters, you could. And then you could go back and read the other one to learn more about them. There's no spoilers, other than the fact that, obviously they're great-granddaughters, so they've got to be from the future. So yeah, as I've said with the others, this is a relatively fun little series, and hopefully I can finish it up pretty soon. So I'm on book 11 out of 16, and this is Hey Kid, Want to Buy a Bridge. And I haven't mentioned, but I really like these illustrations, and I just think they're kind of quirky and funny, and the way the horse is drawn, I don't know what it is about that, but yeah, I just really like this art style. So obviously this book, they go back in time, not into the future, and this is about the Brooklyn Bridge, and they go back in time to right before it was built, the towers are made, and that's about it. And unfortunately, they have some things that were changed, such as you have Thomas Edison, who now doesn't want to invent, and he hasn't invented a whole lot of stuff. And then, of course, baseball is a big thing in these books, And so there is like a baseball game, and you get to learn that there used to be different rules depending, like it mentions that they're playing with Massachusetts rules. And so I thought that was kind of cool. And I do like that we learn again different things about the book. Like, I think there's something about like voice. Where is it? Something about like voice expedition. Voice commands. And then, so you have the sonic warp is one thing that the book can do. But one thing it doesn't say is, okay, they did the sonic warp, which is voice commands, basically. So how did some of this other stuff happen? Like, how did the great-granddaughters wind up there? And I wish that would have been explored. And I feel like this one ends kind of abruptly, because in most of them, when you get to the end, they're back home. In this one, it ends with the green mist. There it is. The green mist cycloned over Prospect Park. And that's it. That's the end. And then you do get a little quirky little inventor's corner that kind of gives you an idea of the future. And it takes the real people that were in here, such as Thomas Edison, and, says he goes on to invent a whole bunch of things. And then Washington and Emily Roebling, that they saw the Brooklyn Bridge project to completion. So it's kind of cool that you get those little bit of facts. I will say with this series, you can definitely read it out of order, but I would say read the first book, then the fifth book, because the fifth book is where you're introduced to the great-granddaughters, and so I feel like that's kind of a prerequisite for the ones where they come in later. But other than those two, read them in any order. Obviously, I'm reading them in publication order, just because that's what I like to do. And yeah, so like I said, I'm almost done. This is 11 out of 16, and I'm definitely going to be interested to see what other sorts of little rules and tricks they come up with for the book. Like, they don't really explain how that sonic thing was activated, where it could be voice activated. Like, it just happened, and I feel like we really need some more solid rules with that. And I'm sorry, you hear my puppy kind of bumping around my chair and everything. So yeah, like I said, this was a pretty solid installment. Overall, I've pretty much given the series all 2 to 3 stars, because I feel like they're really short, even for like beginner chapter books, and that they're very light on plot. I feel like there are books like Magic Treehouse that I would say is about the same level as this, and I feel like they have a little bit more of a plot. But this is very reminiscent of that, in a way that you have these kids who find some sort of magic thing and can now travel in both time and space. So, yeah, I will see you when I finish the next book. So, book 12 is Viking It and Liking It. Obviously, in this one, the boys go back to Viking times, specifically when Leif Erikson came and discovered the New World, America. And one thing I do wish that they would kind of learn how to use the book a little more. Like I said, this is book 12, and they found out a few rules, but they haven't really been able to, like, use them. Their great-granddaughters mention, like, the guides, having it on auto, and stuff like that, but they don't really get, like, anything with that. And then I also just wish they would kind of just go and ask Joe's mom, because his Uncle Joe said that he got the book from her. So, it's kind of like she should know. Just ask her, she's going to help you. And then we've got two of the skalds, or Viking poets here, and their names are Bullsheik and Fuluvit. And yeah, it was kind of a little funny thing that I do feel like, younger readers might find pretty funny as well. And yeah, so again, nothing absolutely amazing, but fun enough, quick enough. They're all these short little less than 100-page books. And as usual, we have the little illustrations. And just, overall, a really fun little time. And if you like John Shuska's other books, like The Stinky Cheese Man and Other Fairly Stupid Tales, I feel like this series is very on par with that. So this is book 13, Me Oh Maya. Obviously, it takes place back in Mayan times, and this one is actually, again, another rather surprisingly violent one, although I suppose the fact, that we pretty much all know Mayans sacrificed people over ball games. That's kind of the plot of this. And however, I did like the resolution to that, and the way that it was kind of stumbled into, but that it was a good resolution and what the boys actually wanted. And this one, yet again though, there is no explanation for like any of the rules of the books, and it's just said, oh, we'll have to read it eventually, but there's only 3 more books left. So I really, really, really want to know, like, at least some of the rules of the book, learn a little bit more about it, maybe at least where it came from. So I'm very hopeful that that will happen in the next couple of books. The Wild, the Crazy Da Vinci finally tells us who invented the book. So I was very happy about that. And if it's not obvious who invented it, just think about it for a second. But yeah, and I also like the fact that in this book, Fred, who always has some sort of baseball cap, has one again, but this time it's NASCAR themed. And it is car number 8. And the year this was published, 2004, Dale Earnhardt Jr. was driving the number 8. And he's my favorite driver, him and Dale Sr. So I thought that was kind of a fun little tidbit in this book. And yeah, this was a pretty fast one, and I did feel like this was one of the better ones in the series as well. And yeah, I will be moving on now to the final 2 books. So in Oh Say I Can't See, obviously we travel back to Revolutionary War time with the Time Warp Trio, and this is the first one that we actually only have 2 of the trio, and that's Joe and Fred, and they wind up with one of the great-granddaughters, Samantha. And so I did enjoy this one as well. It was fun, and I enjoyed getting to see Samantha, and learning just a little bit more about the book. She says that it's set on Tri-Warp, which means there has to be 3 people, and so it randomly chose to go along with her, Fred and Joe, most likely because they were the only 2 left in New York. Sam had went to visit family. And the whole idea of why she time traveled to do like a report on the Revolutionary War, I feel like that's something that would definitely appeal to the younger readers that this is meant to. You know, if only I could just travel back to that time, I could do this report so easily. All I'd have to do is talk to, George Washington or somebody who was there, and voila, my report is done. So I still have to say that my favorite one has probably been the Da Vinci one. However, I do have one more book left, so we'll see if that holds true. The final book in Time Warp Trio is Marco Polo, and I was a little disappointed in the series overall, but this book itself was again fun enough and followed the formula of all the others, and this goes back to a young Marco Polo before he did all his exploring. He was on a trip with his father and uncle to visit the Great Khan, and it just basically follows that. And so basically every book in this series, you have the three boys getting whisked to a different time. They wind up meeting some kind of over-the-top cartoonish villain who has a very funny-sounding name, and then they defeat said villain, get the book, and go back home. So, the reason I was disappointed in this series overall is that there's so many facets of the book that we learn but aren't fully explained, and I feel like they could have been with just an extra sentence or two, in all honesty. Another thing that I kind of disliked was the fact that they all tend to rely on kind of absurd things, absurd coincidences, but I think that's more of the fact that they're, juvenile books. They're not even middle grade. They're for like beginning chapter book readers. And then another thing I did like is that in a lot of these books, there is some sort of trick that Joe does that is something you can easily try at home, such as in one of the books, he has a man sit down with his arms crossed over his chest and then matches his feet to that guy's feet, puts his finger in the middle of the forehead, and tells him to stand up. The man then can't, and it is explained that, because you need to either move your feet or your arms in order to stand up, that this essentially blocks it. And so I did find those sorts of things fun, and there's actually not one of those in this book, surprisingly, because it is something that tends to be in them all. But yeah, overall, I did enjoy this series, and I feel like if you're looking for something for young readers, that this is a series that they could get into, because they are kind of, relatively ridiculous and funny, as well as being short, and I feel like they would definitely appeal to elementary school kids for their kind of gross humor that a lot of them have, and the fact, toilet will make a young kid laugh. So yeah, overall, I am glad that I read the series, but I do wish that I would have read it when I was younger. I think I would have definitely enjoyed it more, and the ones that I did read at a younger age, I do remember fondly.